Craig Shallahamer. Welcome to DOAC TV.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. From your personal work, not your research work.
Yeah.
Your research is about AI,
Yeah.
so it's in the nature is you use it. But for your daily work, for the things everybody can compare with their own work, where do you use AI to make your personal life easier?
Oh, mine? Well, a couple areas. One is I created this AI assistant, and it knows like every published thing I've ever done. We're talking classrooms, just classes, webinars, books, blog, everything. This thing knows about everything.
About you.
About that I've done. And I put in some other Viscosity employee type stuff that's performance related. And you can ask, I gave the AI a personality, like a stereotypical surfer. So I call him Shane, the surfer AI. It's crazy.
Okay, cool.
And so you ask this guy, and he's like, "Hey, dude, what's up?" And I'm like, "Hey, Shane, can you tell me about this, about Oracle, buffers?" And it says, "Oh, that's awesome." And and then he says, "Keep surfing, Craig." I'm like, "Okay," and you can have this conversation. But the knowledge comes from like all my work. It's amazing. The answers are usually really good. And as the AI gets better, the answers will get better and better.
So it's your automated access to your personal library.
It's like I have so much content now that it's overwhelming for people. They're like, well, I don't know which one's going to answer my question. So you can use AI to answer a very specific question.
To read the books for you.
Yeah, exactly. You'll get just literally the paragraph or two that you actually care about. Okay. So that's one example, but how I use it daily, a lot of times for me, I'll use it for, like we mentioned, like JavaScript. I don't know JavaScript, but I have to write some. So I try and get a little bit, and it doesn't work, and so I just paste it into AI and say, it's not working. Can you fix it? It works, right? Yeah. So what that means is that for people like me or anybody who doesn't know, like let's say programming language that well, they're just learning. That gives me a huge jump in terms of
It's a good teacher. It's a good teacher. Yeah.
It's really in fact, it's a good teacher because it tells you what each step is doing, which I might not know. And so I use that, and I suspect a lot of people that are just learning certain things, they can learn very fast with that.
Yes, and from my experience, and I think it's a common IT thing, when you try to come up with something new, you read a lot of documentation you do not use or need in the end. You read things in vain. You just read it and say, okay, that's not what I want. And I read another thing and I don't want it either.
It's frustrating.
And if I can offload that, I can come closer to the point. And in the end, I have to make decisions on the point as well.
That's right.
But coming to the interesting part of the research or the interesting part of the development, maybe script or maybe whatever, that's really cool.
It is. It works so good. It's really when things in terms of like syntax, since it's very clearly defined, it's all outlined and well documented. Lots of examples. It's actually really good at coding. So the other thing that I do, because I do a lot of conference presentations, I immediately when I heard about ChatGPT, I said, oh, this is going to save me hours because unless you put together abstracts for conferences, it'll take me easily, just for the first draft, like 4 hours. And it's just, it's so hard. So now I just kind of do a brain dump, boom, 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 write stuff down, and then I just say, hey, create for me, an abstract, and they're like, okay, make it more technical. It's not make it more entertaining, and you can craft it, and then I do that over and over, and it gets really good. It's amazing. It saves me hours doing that.
Yeah, that's great. And we can see that this AI integration with other services, it's getting closer and closer to the database people's daily work.
Yes.
When you look at that AI integration into the SQL engine or in the human readable SQL way in Oracle, when you can say, okay, please select AI, tell me how many chips I have in this bucket, and they generate the selects for you. What do you think? Is this the future? Will we finally end up with managers writing the SQL on their own for their reports?
Okay, that's so interesting because when I first got out of school, right, and my first job, it was all about 4GLs. Okay, which basically the idea was that a business analyst, they would create all the applications because they know the specifications. Literally, like they supposedly write down the specifications and they give it to some, kind of more technical analyst. It would just crank out the code.
Yeah.
And that kind of worked, but not that well. But it's coming all back around now. It's just, that's like the prompt, what they were doing. So if you get really good at specifying that, it could actually
It's like Star Trek computer.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's just like that. It's exciting. Now the really exciting part will be when it generates the code, and you say test it, and then it actually tests it and works it, and you can see it perform a test, and then it's like, wow, that worked. Yeah, that would be great.
That might. We're coming back to the beginning of our talk.
Yeah.
But for some people, this may sound dangerous.
Oh yeah, it's freaking all sorts of people out. I actually kind of like it. Well, first, the DBAs had to go, especially I'll just say what I know in the U.S. The outsourcing just demoralized, and it's just it destroyed the classic, U.S. DBA. But from a business perspective, it's got to happen. I mean, there's just too much. It just makes sense, right? And so that brings up all sorts of interesting discussions, like, well, then should I specialize and get really good at one thing, or not? But I don't know. So I kind of strayed from that. What was your question?
There was no question. I was just wondering if people wouldn't be afraid of the AI taking away their jobs. Basically, you answered the question in the beginning of the talk.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, in the history of the industry, not only IT, industry in general, automation and offloading tasks from people to a machine has a long history.
Right.
It started with splitting stones and ended up with machinery assembling cars. But wasn't it the case that usually tasks were offloaded that the people didn't love anyway?
Right.
So usually first things you automate are things you don't want to do. As we talked before, if I don't have I don't like to read lots of text I cannot use. It's something I can offload to the AI. If I can save me the time to test a 2-page SQL statement and can get it faster and just read out the problems, yes, that sounds good for the good folks who are good in their job. But I think there is always people who like to just let it flow and change nothing. What are we going to do with this solid backbone people who keep the systems running?
So I heard this really good quote. I wish I'd made up these quotes, but I didn't. One was, what we want to do, we want to take the robot out of the person and leave the person. So the person can thrive and do what they want to do. But now we have a way to take some of the robots, some of that out of the person. And this is like when I teach my AWR classes, Oracle AWR reports, the way I teach it, the process is very mechanical, really straightforward, and it really bothers some people because they're like, "Well, wait a second, you're saying my job is like very mechanical?
It's a checklist."
Yeah, a checklist. And I'm like, well, that part of it is, but your value is not in filling out a form with numbers, setting up the problem. Your value is the analysis that you bring to the numbers. What I'm showing you is just where to get the numbers and how to display them so it makes it easier for you to come up with a solution. And so some people get really offended by that because they want to spend hours doing all these complex things, and it makes the appearance that they're doing incredibly complex work. And actually, really, it's not rocket science, guys.
Isn't it the case that AI can help you analyzing existing data? But what's the biggest weakness? I think it's creativity, isn't it? We talked about a lot of things, haven't we? The creativity. So we won't go that far on this, but what I've actually created I don't want to say an AI world, but there was different characters in a story, and I was one of the characters, and we were like on this journey. And I noticed very quickly, I was trying to encourage the characters to come up with solutions and to say, hey, what's that? And let's explore that. They really wouldn't do that. I had to take the lead or the initiative. They wouldn't do that. Even when I asked them, say, hey, does somebody have an idea? Silence. And I said, okay, well, what do you think about this idea? And then they would respond.
but they didn't come up with this on their own.
So the scenario was you based your scenario on an existing book the AI knew,
Yes.
and you took part in the show,
Yeah.
and you did not pick an existing character. You said, I'm a new character in the show, and you
Yes.
asked them to communicate with you.
Yes.
And then you try to give the story a direction that did not exist in the book.
Yeah. I did two different ways. The first time, I said, let's say like the Wizard of Oz. That was one example. Okay, that everybody gets. So there was what I said to Dorothy, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow. I said, okay, here's our purpose right now. The journey is we are going to try. We need to eliminate the flying monkey threat.
Okay, the classic.
Yeah, I know, this is great. And so they're like, oh, okay, yeah. So we went through that scenario, and they had a backer. They had the story for the context. And then I said, okay, that's okay. I said, okay. So then I said, hey, I heard, I typed this in, I heard there are giant or green giants with one eye that live in the East. Do you want to go, explore and meet these giants?
And this does not exist in the book.
Yeah, it doesn't exist in the book. And they're like, well, that sounds kind of dangerous. And depending upon their character, they would reply slightly different.
But they didn't start an initiative.
No, they didn't. And so I said, well, I think it's a great idea, and it'll be fun, and we can learn. And they're like, okay, yeah, that sounds great, Craig. And then they would, all for one, they would kind of join up together like we're going to go on this journey. They actually did. It was so funny.
But they didn't drive it.
They did not. I could not get them to drive it. I had to take the initiative. Now, maybe that's just the way that I was asking the questions or where the generative AI is at. All that raises all sorts of interesting questions.
Yeah,
but I could not get them to drive it.
And I think that's something it will happen in the IT in the same way.
Yeah.
So if you have a new problem, and the AI will not drive you through the problem, you will have to use it as a tool.
Yeah. I mean, we're still responsible. All right, you can't say, well, the AI told me that. I'm like, okay, great. Then you're gonna get rid of both you and the AI and get somebody else, because we're still responsible for the systems running. Yeah. So you have to check everything.
Yeah, and in the end, it's the responsibility what we get paid for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it's a crazy world. I mean, I really don't know. She'll say, well, what do you think? And and it's shocking that we tend to think that life is going to continue on, the same. Maybe it'll kind of change. But in 5 years from now, come on, who knows? It could be a crazy new world, and I don't know.
But it stays interesting.
It does, and it's changing so fast right now too. It's interesting when you talk to people, especially with the generative AI. They're like, "Oh yeah, that happened so long ago," and we're like, "Wait, that was like a year ago." It's a long ago means like a year. That's ridiculous. I mean, come on, So 5 years, I don't know what's gonna. I really don't know. So many factors that can play into what's coming.
So I'm very much looking forward to our next interview in a few years, and let's talk about the difference. That would be a good thing. So Craig, thank you very much for coming. It was a very interesting talk.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
I hope we have many good things to come and interesting technology to solve.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Good to see you.